It was time.
I am Roderick Usher. I have called you here to take my sister. She's left me alone in this world, the last of the ancient race of Ushers.
I'm sorry, sir.
Yes. Sorry. I am sorry too. She was very ill.
And I was with this girl, this beautiful girl from Westwood. She knew a fortune teller on the pier, so we all go to the pier. The fortune teller reads her palm, and this is what she saw. We're married, we got 2 kids, we got a dog. Boom! A week later, she leaves, she dumps me. Not what, nothing. Just so much for fucking fortune telling.
Welcome to Terror at Collinwood. 'Tis I, Penny Dreadful, bringing you an episode that I am very excited about, and you should be too, because we're going to be celebrating the one, the only Christopher Pennock, the Leviathan Messiah himself. We are here to talk all about him and his work, particularly in the films of Mr. Ansel Faraj. And before we get started, I want to just say that this episode is dedicated to Ellen Dunn, Chris's wife, who is selling Chris's comics. You can contact her over on Facebook Messenger, or you can email her at ellendunn, ELLYN, DUNN at iCloud.com. And Chris's comics are wild if you love like R. Crumb kind of underground independent comics. They're super cool, and they are several of them are about I think the first 6 in the series are about, there you go, yeah, about Dark Shadows, Fear and Loathing in Dark Shadows, about his experiences and real fun, trippy, cool stuff. So definitely reach out to Ellen if you're interested in getting Chris's comics. I believe there are 8 total. So without further ado, I want to give a little bit of background here about my illustrious guests who have been kind enough to join me today. And I want to thank Ansel Faraj here for pulling this team together to do this. And Ansel's going to be helping me out by helping carry the load by he's going to be editing this and putting in some really cool clips from some of the projects he worked on with Chris. So I really look forward to seeing what Ansel's going to whip up here. But speaking of Ansel, returning to the podcast is the one and only Ansel Faraj, the filmmaker behind Theatre Fantastique, the Dr. Mabuse trilogy, The Last Case of August T. Harrison, Loon Lake, Todd Tarantula, The Great Nick D, The Most Haunted House of Venice Beach, and more. Ansel has worked with many of the Dark Shadows cast members in a variety of projects, and I'm thrilled to have him back to help celebrate Chris Pennock. I'm also delighted to welcome 4 fantastic actors. Elyse Ashton, a series regular of Theatre Fantastique, where she acted opposite Christopher Pennock in episodes The Madness of Roderick Usher, The Family Wolf, A Poem of Poe, and the film Dr. Mabuse, Etiopomar. She was also a guest star on Sabrina the Teenage Witch and on PBS's Poldark. Douglas Eames, who acted opposite Chris Pennock in Dr. Mabuse, Etiopomar, and Theatre Fantastique episode The Family Wolf. Can also be seen in Babylon, Glory Road, and Todd Tarantula. Kelsey Hewlett, another series regular from Theatre Fantastique, who acted opposite Chris Pennock in A Descent into a Maelstrom, The Family Wolf, A Poem of Poe. She can also be seen in Just Our Luck and Tales of the Frontier. And last but certainly not least, Kelly Kitko, who acted opposite Chris Pennock in Dr. Mabuse, Etiopomar, The Nighttime Winds, and Theatre Fantastique episode Madame Lesueur. She can also be seen in Devil's Domain and as the witch Mary Jane in Loon Lake. Welcome to the show, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Oh, it is absolutely my pleasure. As I was saying before we started recording, seeing all your faces pop up, I was like, wow, I'm like watching all of Ansel's films at once. I've seen you all in various of his projects, and I've enjoyed watching all of your performances. And it's such a pleasure to get to meet you virtually in person here, and for such a cool topic here to talk about Chris Pennock, which Ansel had proposed the idea to me. And of course, I was all in on that because although I never had the opportunity to meet Chris in person, sadly, I wish I had. I'd been to 2 festivals, but I think Chris was at the ones I went to. I never got to meet him, and but he seemed like such a cool person. And interviews I've seen with him and everything I've heard about him, I'm sure I would have absolutely loved Chris. So I wanna hear all about Chris. I want to celebrate Chris and talk about him. So before we jump in, I want to give a little background on him as an actor. Chris Pennock was a graduate of the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. Was active for over 40 years, starring on and off Broadway in repertory and experimental theater and in many films and television shows. In Dark Shadows, he played Jabez Hawks, Dr. Cyrus Longworth and John Yeager, Sebastian Shaw, Gabriel Collins, Parallel Time Gabriel Collins, and yet another Gabriel Collins in the film Night of Dark Shadows. He appeared in over 50 guest starring roles on television, from Melrose Place to General Hospital, as well as numerous films, among them James Ivory's Savages and Graham Clifford's Frances, starring Jessica Lange and Sam Shepard. He was a lifetime member of the Actors Studio. Chris wrote and illustrated his series of comic books about his experiences on Dark Shadows, and of course was in several of Ansel's projects, including Theatre Fantastique, Dr. Mabuse, I'm not going to say it again, The Job Interview, The Most Haunted House of Venice Beach. So, all right. So we give some background here on Chris, but let's hear about what I want to hear about. I want to experience. I want the Chris Pennock experience, and I want to experience that vicariously through all of you, because I was reading an article, Ansel, that you wrote for the upcoming Daytime Gothic Volume 2. And one thing, I laughed out loud several times while I was reading it. And one thing in particular was you walking into the Dark Shadows Festival and with Chris and him letting out a blood-curdling shriek, which you thought he was having a stroke or something. But it was him summoning his fans to come over to him, which is awesome. So talk about, Ansel, how did you first meet Chris Pennock? Like, how did you become, oh, I knew you knew him from Dark Shadows, obviously.
Yeah.
How did you?
Right. Well, we were doing the original first Dr. Mabuse movie, and
Yeah.
Catherine suggested, she said, "Why don't you get in touch with Chris for a role?" And I did, but he was going through some stuff at that time. I think he just finished doing King Lear at the Actors Studio, so he was also sort of like depleted, because I think everybody here, we can all attest, when Chris would give a performance, he would give everything and just sort of spill all his guts out. And so when we were doing the sequel, I reached out to him and I said, there's this role of Conrad's the librarian who's sort of becoming a revolutionary guy, and that very much appealed to Chris because he was a bit of a revolutionary himself. And then I don't think I met him in person until the premiere for the first film, and which, I mean, I was super young, and there was all these people, had never been in a theater, seen my work in a movie theater before. It was just like, it was a whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was kind of freaking out, and And Chris goes, "How are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm freaking out right now. I'm kind of having a heart attack." He goes, "Me fucking too." And that was kind of like the, the start, and that kind of sums up Chris too, in a way. Uh, just his energy and his bombacity, and but also he set me at ease immediately by doing that. And at the same time, he was freaking out himself. He wasn't lying at any point either. And then we got to work.
That's amazing. Yeah. And just so people know, this is going to be the all swearing episode of Tara at Collinwood in honor of Chris Pennock. So, uh, and John Carlin by proxy. All right. So you met Chris, and how did you get him involved in your films? Was he like all in when you brought it up to him, or
Yeah,
did you have to talk him into it, or?
no, it wasn't that hard. He was very excited, and then he uh, he liked his part because it appealed to him, with, as I said, the revolution aspect of it.
Yeah.
And it was a big part. I mean, it was like sort of like the main villain, and everybody on this screen were like henchmen or they were part of his revolutionary posse. Like Kelly played his daughter, and Doug was his right hand man, and Elyse was a witch, but she was like infiltrating the cabal that Chris had got going, and yeah, it wasn't that hard to rope him into it. And then I just remember when we were shooting it though, because we're shooting with one camera, and it was June and summer, and we're in my little makeshift sound stage, so it's cramped and it's hot, and there's lights, and we would do take after take after take so I could get it from different angles. And Chris, as I said, he would give everything. And so I remember one day he got upset, and I'm like, "Well, Chris, we got to do it again." And he started cussing, and it's like, "I'm retiring. I'm fucking done with this. God damn it." And I'm like, "What am I gonna do? Shit, we've been going for like 2.5 weeks now. What am I gonna do?" And and Doug, did you talk him down, or like what? I remember because it came the next day. Everything was great.
He had an anxiety attack on the drive in from Idlewild. He didn't know the way to Ansel's aunt's house where we were shooting, and he got lost. And he called, and he's like, "I'm going back to Idlewild." Like we were all sitting there waiting for him. And yeah, so I actually went and got him. I asked him where he was. I said, "Do you see anything, like a landmark, something that you recognize, a street corner?" And so we met at a service station, a gas station, a few miles from Ansel's aunt's house, and then I just had him follow me in, and he calmed down once he got there.
Chris getting lost, getting to places seems to be a recurring theme in his life, because you bring this up, and then there's the story about the festival and driving there and him freaking out about that. And then there's the story when he was even on Dark Shadows and he got off the subway at the wrong stop and he was in Harlem.
Really? I didn't hear about that one.
Yeah. I'm sure Ansel can tell that story if you'd like, but
he said that one day, because we would shoot Theatre Fantastique and stuff. On breaks, we'd all just listen to these stories that he had, and he had stories. And one day he said he'd gotten off. It was like a long day on Dark Shadows, and he'd gotten off the subway, and he ended up in Harlem, and it's, what is it, 1970,
yeah.
And so he said that all the pimps started surrounding him. And then a prostitute recognized him. She said, "Hey, that's Jeb. He's on my story." And all the prostitutes came running after him, and he's fleeing back to the subway. And
he definitely had some funny, like really funny stories. I want to go around just and hear from all of you about your initial impressions of him, and then what your takeaway was when you watched him performing and working opposite him, what he was like to work with. So I'll just go around. We'll start with Kelly. How about you? What was your introduction to Chris, and how did you find the Chris Pennock experience?
Well, the Chris Pennock experience was an experience indeed. Ansel will tell you, I have a really bad memory, and I apologize in advance. I don't remember meeting Chris. I don't remember meeting Doug or Kelsey or Elyse. I apologize. You all mean the world to me, but I don't remember what happened yesterday, so it's just the way it is. So I'm sure I met Chris. Don't remember when it was, don't remember how it happened. But I remember once we started working together that Ansel kind of set up the story with talking about being in the garage, the infamous, garage where we spent so many hours at varying degrees of temperature. And there are a lot of kinds of actors in LA, but I'm going to say right now there are two kinds. There's the kind who, they want to be on a series and they want to be in a Marvel movie and they want to do this and that and have these perks and have this lifestyle and like that's what's important to them. And then there are actors who want to act. And Chris Pennock was an actor who wanted to act. It did not matter if we were in the garage. It did not matter if we were in his spare bedroom in Idlewild. It did not matter if we were on a green screen, the circumstances did not matter to him because what mattered to him was the storytelling and the immersion in whatever we were. So I can guarantee you that when he was on, Melrose Place, which was as far budget wise from what we were doing, not so far geographically, but budget wise from what we were doing, he was probably giving a better performance with us because he cared about it more, because it was more important to him. And that kind of care, I think Ansel, when you started with Chris, were you like 21?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Ansel's 21. We're in the garage. Other people might have been like, what is this situation here? Especially given where he came from in his background. You never once got that from Chris, that he was better than or should have been doing something else. He was always immediately completely immersed and serious in what we were doing and showed the utmost kind of like care for it. And I just remember like, whenever we talked about, oh, the next project, he was so excited about it. It didn't matter what it was. He was so excited just to have the opportunity to keep acting. And that love, like when I think of Chris, what I think of is the love for the art that he put into everything that he did all the time. That's the thing that I most like equate with Chris.
Great. Elyse, how about you?
I think I met him in your mom's hallway. I was waiting for the bathroom. He was coming out of the bathroom, so it was very glamorous. But he came around the corner and he just has his own energy. He just brought his own light to everything and he just gave me this great big smile. And I saw his little toe shoes he wore with the separate little toes.
Oh, yes.
And yeah, and we kind of looked at each other and yeah, and sort of wacky recognizes wacky. And just immediately he was, like I said, it's the light. It just brings you in. He cared about other actors. You see the generosity and everything. You feel immediately at home with him as an actor because he's just incredibly generous and giving with energy. And even by the time we did Family Wolf, I remember he's in a chair, I'm sitting on the arm of the chair, and I was spilling out how I was having trouble getting my mind around a character. And he just sits quietly for a moment and looked up at me and goes, "It sounds like she has borderline personality syndrome," which, okay. Well, I go home and I'm Googling it, and exactly, I realized I know people like this. Now I can get into this character, but he was so insightful. He really carried his wisdom around and shared it with all of us. So he is so missed. I can't even tell you when it was like a light went out.
Yeah.
When Ansel had posted that he passed away, but he just made you feel without any kind of sleaze that he was embracing you as a fellow artist. and as part of the family.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. How about you, Douglas?
Well, I first met Chris on Facebook, of all places. It was really funny because I had connected with I'd seen Dark Shadows when I was a little kid. I was 5 years old, and I couldn't follow the plot back then, but I just remember a vampire would, come out, and then I'd run and hide in the bathroom or something. And then had found some episodes of Dark Shadows on YouTube, and I was watching it, and I was able to get caught up on, pick up where I left off. And I was just getting to the part where Chris arrived as Jeb Hawks. And I thought, oh, I wonder what became of him. So I, just kind of looked around, and I saw, oh, he's got a Facebook page. And then after I sent him a friend request, and I saw he was like right up the hill in Idlewild, it was like 45 minutes away, and in Palm Springs. And when it's summertime, you go up to the mountain to cool off, because it's always cooler up there in Idlewild. And so, I had been up there hiking and stuff already, and I loved going up there. And so it was really surprising just to find out that he lived so close, for starters. And so we got to be friends on Facebook, and I was just one of the many villagers. And then he had an event in Idlewild where he was reading from his comic books. And so I went up to see him, and I got all these comic books there. Yeah. And if you ever really want some insight into Chris's personality and the way his mind works, these are great, because it's really hard to tell where the truth leaves off and the legend of Chris Pennock takes over. Because, in it, he talks about going to the White House and putting acid in the punch bowl. And I'm like, I don't think that really happened, but,
Oh, I was going to vote that was true. Like, if we have to pick, what's true and false, I'd be like, yeah, he did that.
It may have been true. I don't know. But, he just... You sort of felt like you might have, there might be some tall tales in there somewhere. But he just said, I went up, and the first impression that I got was any sense of pretense went out the window. Any sense you had of what a Hollywood actor would be like, he was just the sort of guy that was, I guess he was like an old hippie in a lot of ways, because, he just invite you over to his house, and he'd have these parties and drum circles, and all the locals and Idlewild would come up. And he also had a way of connecting with the square pegs of the world. Like if you weren't part of the mainstream group, you're kind of off in your own little beating of your own drum, you would fit in with Chris. And so yeah, any sense of pretense and just that wild sense of humor and that larger than life childlike quality that he had. And we just connected right there. And I don't know exactly what it was, but sometimes you meet somebody and they seem to understand you right away, and you don't know what it is or how that works exactly. But that's how it felt with Chris. It's like, well, he gets where I'm coming from, and he kind of saw the best in me, and sometimes I have to, I don't always come across as best I can to people at times, but it was like he just was able to relate to me right away, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so I would just go up to his parties regularly. He was always having these little like Christmas parties and various groups. And then I met Ansel through that group mm-hmm. on Facebook. And then that's how we connected. And, then we ended up in Etiopomar together.
Yeah, I remember hearing he used to just post invitations to parties at his house to fans, or just on Facebook, and just come to my house for this party and stuff, which is amazing.
His address on Facebook. I remember he put his address on Facebook for his birthday party. Like, Chris, why would you do that? He goes, they're gonna come, they're gonna show up, and they can make it up the mountain. Why not?
Yeah.
I don't want to preempt Kelsey, but Doug said something I wanted to tack on to before I
Sure.
forgot. You used the word childlike,
Hmm.
and I want to use it in a positive way because I don't really like children, but in this case, I feel like children approach the world with a sense of wonder, where a lot of times they're experiencing something for the first time. And I feel like Chris also looked at everything with a sense of childlike wonder in the best way of experiences being new and exciting and interesting and having that perspective on like he was never jaded. He was never like over it. He was never that just that love of life and childlike wonder, as you said, Doug, for
Yeah.
everything that he was experiencing, I think was really kind of a big part of who he was that I just love that about him.
Yeah.
Yeah, he like Ansel was saying, he would give 100% of himself. I mean, whether it was like, a little uh, bare bones production in the garage, or if he was in a big budget Hollywood movie, he just gave 100% of himself. And I remember I saw him at the Actors Studio, and he played Sir in The Dresser, which is this 2 hour and 45-minute play. And it takes place during the Blitz during World War II. And it's this theater company, and he's the lead actor in the theater company, and he's gradually going completely crazy throughout the
Yeah.
play. And Chris just captured this pathos of the character, and it seemed almost an extension of his own personality, because you didn't know where it left off and he began, because um, it was kind of him. He was just so larger than life, and he embraced his vulnerability. Most of us are trying to act a little more sane than we are, maybe, but he, he embraced his eccentricity, not in a fake way, but a very genuine way. And he didn't try to hide it, or it's sort of what's that saying? It's like you take your weakness and you make it into your strength. So he had a lot of anxiety in his real life, because I guess if you're giving 100% of yourself, you're very committed to what you're doing, and at times I think that can cause a lot of anxiety.
Right.
But he would just openly express it, and and somehow it just
Yeah.
all worked and it all came together, and he could just bring people together. I never saw anybody that could just bring so many people together that just loved him, and then he'd be poking people right
Yeah.
and left. And
He seemed pretty, I mean, universally beloved, I know, at least for sure, by the Dark Shadows fan community. He
oh
just seemed
yeah,
like everybody loved Chris Penn and the cast too, his cast members in the show. Like everybody always says positive things about him. He was close with, James Storm, and he would
mm.
support them too and go see their shows and things. So, Kelsey, how about you? What about your impressions of Chris when you met him and interacted with him?
Yeah, oh, he was great. He was so big and loud and absolutely unabashedly himself. When I first started working with Ansel on Ansel's projects, I was fairly new to Los Angeles. So meeting someone like Chris, who just truly did not give a shit what anyone thought of him, was so refreshing, and so it's so different than everything else I was experiencing all at once in Hollywood. So really, really loved getting to watch him and listen to what he had to say. When he was not acting, he was not acting. He was truly just himself at all times. And we've talked about his big personality, and certainly I got to experience some of that with Theatre Fantastique. And I remember, Ansel, do you remember the conch? Lord, the conch. Just passing around the conch, and everything was about the conch and blow the
oh
conch.
yeah.
Oh my gosh, it was so big. But I also just remembered him as a person, and the way his face would light up when he would talk about his family. And he was so deeply proud of his daughter Tara, and that was beautiful to see. And anytime he would talk about Idlewild, in his home in Idlewild. He would talk about it like it was just this fairy oasis. Yeah, I had never been there, and it just sounded like this hippie wonderland, and he just adored it. And to see his face light up when he talked about those things was so wonderful. And then in working with him as an actor, I always thought his scenes were so interesting because every single take, no matter how many times we did it, there was always some gold in it because Chris was so intent about listening authentically. So no matter how many times we had done the scene, no matter how many times the actor opposite him had delivered a line, maybe in the exact same way, he heard it as if it was the first time. And his reactions sometimes were quite varied, and when we didn't quite know what we were going to get out of a particular take with him, but there was always something real and something really juicy in it, and it was just magical to watch. And it taught me a lot as an actor about the importance of listening, always listening as if it is the very first time. And so watching that in Chris was really beautiful.
Yeah. I'm hearing so many things that just that I, even not having met him, but just having watched his performances and watched interviews with him, his energy, it comes across in a big way. He seemed like it was luminescent, in his demeanor and just being around him. I'm sure that everyone picked up on that. Ansel, like directing, what was it like directing Chris in
Uh,
projects?
I actually probably learned the most out of directing from working with Chris. I mean, very much so when we did the second Mabuse film, and I was juggling a lot of people and a very crazy elaborate script and no money and just being like I would give terrible directions, but I'd be like, okay, well, you're angry here. So just something so basic.
Mhm.
But by the time that by the time I was done working with Chris, or we'd done the season, the Theatre Fantastique, and Chris was also taking me to the actor studio, and I really learned the method and how to approach actors, how to handle actors, how to speak to them, how to get in their head, so to speak. Um, so my whole modus operandi of getting a performance out of an actor had shifted, and I was able to, you know, explain what was the emotional truth of the scene, and you know, give more of the emotion rather than the aesthetic and the mood, which is what I kind of had done in the past. Just of being able to be more truthful with the storytelling and with the emotions of the story itself,
Yeah.
and getting that sort of emotional roller coaster out of an actor. I was able to learn how to do that working with Chris. I have no idea if any of that made sense.
No, it did. Was it ever, because he seems like he really craved direction sometimes in a lot of
Well, every actor wants to be directed,
sure, sure. It's
they
true.
but sometimes sometimes with Chris, yeah, I would give him a starting point.
Mhm.
I mean, the one that comes to my mind, actually, the one time where when I actually felt like, okay, now I think I'm a director. We were doing a poem of Poe, and Chris was playing Death, and I remember he was very panic stricken when he showed up, and he's like, because it was all, everybody was reciting poems and stanzas and lines of dialogue
Mhm.
from Poe's actual writings. So in a sense, it was like some very bizarre musical, if that, like, it's lyrics like that they're saying.
Yeah.
And Chris was trying to wrap his mind around, how do I do this? How do I bring this to life and be honest? And I said, I want you to play Death as a sad Fellini clown. And in my head, I was like, oh, that sounds really good. But he goes, I get it. And then he did it. And
Yeah.
he did what was right, and what I had wanted, what I envisioned, but I just gave him a very simple thing like that. but sometimes, you would just kind of like let Chris loose and let him do his thing because you knew it was going to be good and you knew that he also knew what to do. And, something like, the happy home of the murderous Mahones, I didn't tell him to do anything. I was just like, just go, freak out. And that's all just Chris. And,
Yeah. The
maybe,
most haunted house of Venice Beach is Chris too, though, right?
yeah, I mean, that was totally, I mean, I remember when I sent it to him, he goes, "Oh, this character is me." And I'm like, yeah, because I wrote it for you. It is you. But again, there, I didn't direct him. He knew what to do because it was, this beatnik guy that's doing poetry night at Beyond Baroque in Venice, and he used to be an old surfer and wants just to smoke a joint on the boardwalk. Like, that's Chris.
Yeah.
Down to the acid flashbacks. And
But also, like, everything was Chris. Like, I don't want to interrupt, but like,
yeah,
Chris was able to shift effortlessly from the most haunted house of Venice Beach, the surfer beatnik who's clearly like still kind of high. And, I'm thinking of the character in Etiopomar where he's very like almost menacing and powerful and powerfully silent and whatnot. And I think the reason that he could do, I guess you're an actor, you're supposed to be able to do that. But for Chris, they were all him.
yeah,
He was always just drawing from himself and sharing that aspect, wherever that was inside, the sad Fellini clown, like that's in there somewhere. And he's like, okay, I get it. And then he pulls it out and delivers it. Everything he did. And I think the reason that he was so good at playing this wide variety of characters was they were all in him. And he was just able to like harness wherever that was lingering inside and bring it out 100% to fill out the character.
Mm-hmm.
So when Ansel said like, oh, I wrote it for him, he was that. He was, but he also was every other part too, if that makes sense.
The biggest thing to do with Chris would be maybe to rein him in momentarily. Maybe.
I was going to say, yeah, his default setting is very theatrical. It'd be like, "Hello, this is Chris." It's very, very large. But he could come down when he needed to.
Yeah. And like I remember a moment. So in Mabuse 2, the characters are archetypes. They're not fully fleshed people, and that's because I was 20 years old and didn't know what the hell I'm doing. But also it was like a grand comic book. But there was a sequence that I remember it happened in literally in the take where Chris has engineered all these things to cause Kelsey to kill herself very violently, and everybody's witnessed it. And Kelly plays Chris's daughter, and she's unhappy with the path that he's taking. And so the way that the shot was set up was Kelly was standing like right behind Chris in the garage, and Chris is up here in close up. And it was this moment of just like, don't screw with this guy.
Yeah.
He's dangerous. But that was just something, and yet it said so much about this moment created more of a relationship than what was written on the page. And that was just accomplished just through a look. And that shows also just even when Chris wasn't speaking and wasn't, because that's Chris. What he would accomplish with his eyes, with his body language, with his energy.
Mm-hmm.
You were, I mean, that's also why, off screen, we were all kind of like just drawn to him because he's just had this magnetism,
That's kind of a related story, if that's okay.
Sure, yeah. If anybody wants to jump in, please feel free to.
It has to do with, both Doug and Ansel were talking about Chris being big Chris and being theatrical Chris. And it also goes to kind of Chris as a mentor for us as actors and what we learned. And I remember, Ansel, I actually do remember a moment of something that we did, believe it or not. I remember when we were filming Loon Lake and we're in the woods
Yeah.
in this scene, and we're at the altar. And I also, just in life, am very theatrical and overly whatever I am. And Ansel kind of has to like rein me in because, for film, it has to be a little quieter, a little more believable, a little more natural or whatever. And it's this scene where I have to like cover myself in the blood of the whatever. And we were kind of talking about it and how it needed to be more than just the quiet theatrical thing. And I looked at him and I was like, okay, are you giving me permission to go full Chris Pennock? And he was like, yeah. And what that meant was to me, and Ansel knew what I meant. Okay, I'm going to be 100% consumed in this thing that I'm doing with like full kind of emotion and vigor. It was this permission to be 100%. And it's like that, like it's just something I got from Chris. Like it was his energy and his and that part I don't even think had any dialogue. It was just about the living out of it and doing it as Chris would have done.
I have an addendum. I have an addendum. So when we shot the scene, we're in the woods. She's supposed to be naked and covering herself in blood. And so I said, she goes, I'm gonna make Daddy proud because she played Chris's daughter in Mabuse too. So then we shoot the movie. We come back from Minnesota, and there's another Dark Shadows gathering. God help us all, and Chris is there. And I'm telling him about it, and I said, so we did this scene, and Kelly's like naked in the woods, and she puts blood on herself, and she says, I'm gonna make Daddy Chris proud. He goes, and did she? God damn it! I bet she did.
That's awesome.
Chris.
It's the way you're you're describing him being just all in. That's what I remember, when I was a teenager at this point when I was watching him in Dark Shadows and Leviathans. They were rerunning Dark Shadows out of Cape Cod, Vineyard Haven, channel 58. I saw him as Jeb, and I loved that storyline. It was very Lovecraftian, and he was this Lovecraftian creature kind of character. And then it went into the parallel time storyline, and he did Jekyll and Hyde. And I thought, when I first saw him as Dr. Cyrus Long, he's this sort of meek kind of, he played it like David Niven-esque, this character. And it was a a huge contrast to Jeb, who was real pompous and arrogant and stuff. And then he played the Hyde character, John Yeager, perfect casting for that role because he was insane in that role. I mean, he just chewed the seat. Talk about chewing the seat, but he was just like he was fantastic in that part. And then later on, he played the astrologer character, Sebastian Shaw.
Oh yeah, Sebastian Shaw.
And then Gabriel Collins might be maybe his best role.
Wheelchair.
The wheelchair with the wheelchair, who is very, very just different characters, but all like you described, Kelly, all Chris. You can see him in each of those roles. And then the parallel time, Gabriel Collins, he was hiding alcohol all over the house. So
it's interesting when you mentioned that. It reminds me that I once asked him, I said, out of all those characters you played, which one is closer to your true personality? And he told me it was Cyrus Longworth,
interesting.
the quiet one.
Huh.
But I guess Cyrus was sort of like a bit of that geek personality, and he liked just comic books, and so he was sort of a, I guess a geek, at heart. And Cyrus was probably the closest.
What's that answer?
I said Chris was a theater nerd.
A theater nerd,
really. I mean, he just spat out Shakespeare, and you just sit there and be like, "Wow."
Yeah, but he was super into those underground comics too, because I remember reading about some interview with him where he was going on about. And my late husband loved those comics too. He had a big stack of those, the R. Crumbs and all of that kind of stuff, Harvey Picar and all that.
Yeah, I was trying to remember the Crumb one because I was going to mention that he loved that comic strip, and I think he knew the guy.
Was it Zap Comics or something like that? But there were a whole bunch of those. But he Yeah, that's interesting that he felt that he was closest to the
Yeah,
Cyrus
the
Long
quiet
character.
guy.
Yeah. I know. I just want to circle back. I did not mean to imply when I said the Gabriel Collins hiding alcohol. I did not mean to imply that Chris was doing. That was not what I meant. I just meant he was great in that part, playing that character. And then in Night of Dark Shadows, I wish we could. He was in it more. The scenes that there were scenes that were cut that he was, as as Ansel knows. But I wish that we could have seen more of him in that. But he was fantastic in that as well. Ansel, anything to add to that?
I mean, something interesting with Chris is that he and I never really talked about Dark Shadows because I mean, as we've been saying, he was so full of other stories, and so we didn't really talk about Dark Shadows.
Other than the stories you can't tell on the podcast.
Yeah, there's a couple that I actually can't repeat, but but because that's also something with Chris is that he had no filter. I mean, we've all been saying basically there was no filter in his personality, but he would tell you things and you'd just be like, are we sure that we're supposed to know this? Because
and out of nowhere he'd tell a story.
Right.
And kind of, I think he'd see you being a little pensive and like, she needs a story.
Yeah.
So he'd lean over and tell me stories about being an actor in New York in the 70s and how he got in a fight on the subway and ended up in the hospital. And I'm just, because I've just met him too, and I'm a little bit in awe of this background he has. But he'd tell me, I mouthed off and this guy punched me in the and I'm just, oh my goodness, because, and there he says he feels most at home with the quiet guy, and I'm thinking this was not always a quiet guy.
He was a very well-rounded personality because in spite of all this, the big theatrical Chris, he was also a Tibetan Buddhist. And
yes, yeah.
And that was this other facet of his personality. And
that's where the conch comes in.
Yeah. He would blow the conch, and he was the Tibetan form of Buddhism has a lot of ceremony in it, and I think that kind of went with Chris because it was kind of theatrical, and
didn't one day he do a ceremony for us, like
before
we started filming, or am I tripping now?
Well, I remember on Family Wolf he had his conch and he was blowing the conch and he was showing us how that was part of the.
But I remember that
ceremony.
He like did a whole thing one day. I remember that he said like I'm totally losing my mind. I remember Chris did a whole Tibetan ritual for us like before we started shooting.
Well, he would dispense Shaktipat, which was
that's right.
I mean, there are all these terms and things that you would learn from him, and he would just rattle it off just like it was the most ordinary thing.
Where would he go for these retreats? Do you know where he would go when he would go?
In Idlewild, there's actually a Tibetan Buddhist center, and that's where we had his memorial service. It was several months after he had passed, and he was cremated, and we buried his ashes in front of this Buddhist center out at Idlewild. And he had been married. There was a place like halfway down the hill where he and Lynn had been married. So that whole area is just very retreaty.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And it's in itself. And
how about funny stories? I mean, he was quite a raconteur, quite a storyteller. He would tell these funny stories. Are there any that come to mind that were memorable or that made you laugh, or any of you that want to jump in on that?
When he said that he dropped acid and went to Disneyland.
Talk about that. What was that? What did he say that experience was like?
He said that I don't remember what year it was, but he dropped acid and was at Disneyland, and that they got about a third of the way into they were by the castle. That was where he totally had his freak out. And he said that, all these fucking costumed characters are coming at me. And I said, go away. And I need quiet. And I'm also just like, Chris as we've been saying, Chris is already like larger than life, and I wish that there was somebody had videoed what Chris on acid would have been like.
Mm.
Just because I'm sure that was an amazing performance too.
Yeah.
Because everything with him was a performance. It was always he was always on,
Mhm.
and whether he was on acid or he's on stage. But like I remember that, and we'd all again like Elyse and we're all been saying you just sit there and you'd hear these stories.
Yeah.
And then when he said that he streaked naked on Broadway,
Oh yeah,
got up out of in his Broadway debut, he got out of bed naked.
Yeah.
that was a
Uh,
recurring theme with him,
yeah,
streaking and things.
yeah.
That's always coming up.
Free.
Well, I was trying to think of something funny. I guess the funniest stuff with him would be on Facebook, just his interactions with the different people. And I was just trying to think of real life stories I remember. And one wasn't funny, it was horrible, but it just shows like the larger than life world that was him. He was in his car. He had like this Prius, this older Prius, and he was parked in North Hollywood getting ready to do a matinee, and somebody just came and rear-ended his car
Oh.
and totaled it with him inside. And he wanted to go on and do his play. It's like, they're getting him out of the car, and he goes, "No, I can still go on." And they took him to St. Joseph's Providence Hospital in Burbank and got him checked out. Unfortunately, he was okay.
Yeah.
And I was in the neighborhood, so I went and picked him up, and we drove out to Idlewild. And
Yeah.
so it wasn't always necessarily a funny story, but it was just sort of like a larger than life story.
Yeah. Yeah. Did he end up doing the show? Did he after getting
No,
out of the
they
hospital?
told
No.
him that they were just going to
No,
cancel.
they're not going to let him.
I guess that's the funny part.
Yeah.
He wanted to just
Just
go
the
ahead
show
and do
must
the
go
show
on.
anyway.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Wiping the
Wow.
blood off it.
Jeez. Wow. Kelsey, any stories you care to share?
Just the best thing about his stories was I was never really sure how much of it was true or if
Yeah,
it was true and I wasn't sure if he even believed it. I always thought that he would make a really good stand-up comedian. I do stand-up in Los Angeles, and there's a formula to comedy writing. It is cognitive dissonance plus exaggeration.
Mhm.
And he was a master of both at any kind of story he told. And I was always left wondering, like, did this really happen or was this total bullshit? And he was just trying to entertain me. But either way, like I wanted to believe it. He wanted to. It was always just so great and so much fun.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the life that he brought to every room he was in.
Yeah. Yeah. Elyse, how about you?
I don't think it matters if you believe it or not. You're just there with him in the story, and he would bring it to life. And he'd tell me stories about being an actor in the 70s, 60s in New York. And we talked a lot about the theater, but he could get very quiet, and he was such a wonderful listener and really dispensed wisdom from his experience. And he would sometimes get very quiet, tell me some family things, and that you just really felt as if you were part of his world. He's the only one who could poke me on Facebook without me being angry. So, but yeah, he had a real tenderness about him as well when you maybe talk about a problem or something like that.
Mhm.
But then, he'd work you through that, and then he'd, finish it off with a story and just have you laughing by the end and giving him a hug and thanking him for being there.
That's great.
Yeah, what Elyse is saying, I mean, he did actually care about every single one of us.
Mhm.
Was invested in all of our troubles or whatever it was that we were going through, and it wasn't just like he's there to act and have fun. Like he was involved and gave a damn. And that's also Kelsey kind of touched on that too. That's also very rare in LA and very rare in the sort of self-absorbed acting scene of things, where he would just like he gave a shit. He
Right.
gave a shit.
About people, it sounds like,
Yeah.
for sure, and about his work as well. Like when you've cast him as Roderick Usher, he called Martin Landau and to get advice on playing Roderick Usher. Like he really wanted to nail it, and get some advice from Martin Landau, which is good. He was friends with him, as you
Martin
pointed out.
Landau was his mentor at the Actors Studio,
Yeah.
and one day he took me, and I had a meeting with Martin Landau about being in Dunwich Horror, which Chris would have been in. But also, yeah, but outside of his work too, he cared about you, and he cared about your life and your experiences and your ups and downs,
Yeah.
and supportive. And if you needed to talk to somebody, Chris was a great person to, as like Elyse said, that he would listen and respond.
Yeah.
And he was electric, like we've been saying, but he was also just like as honest as he was in his performances.
Yeah. Kelly, how about you? Any fun stories you want to share?
Like I said, not a good memory, so I
Okay.
can't think
That's
of a
okay.
funny story. But what Kelsey said made me think. I wish that we had played, that game like Two Truths and a Lie or Two Lies and a Truth. I wish we had played that with him, because when you said you could never really tell, I always felt like I believed everything that he said, because he was so wild and free that I never had a doubt that he would have. I mean, this is a man who did acid and then went to Disneyland. Like there was no doubt that he would have done any of the things that he told us about. And yeah, just
like stealing a jacket from the General Hospital.
Sure.
Ansel wrote in your article that he stole it. He said, I stole this jacket from General Hospital. The whole suit. I stole this suit from General Hospital. Fuck them.
But he really was, as everybody just said, like a real person too, and a real person who cared, and a real person who like took the time to listen to you or help you or just be there with you. Like he was never, there are people who, like, I've been on sets where there are people who have, not the background and the credentials that Chris has, that when it's time for lunch or whatever, like, they're going to go off by themselves. They're not going to like associate with you or whatever it is. And Chris was just so the opposite of that. And so just there with you in every sense of the word, just as, a real person. And I just, I appreciate
there was no wall.
Yeah,
Chris.
That's
usually
cool.
There's a wall. There's celebrities that'll be nice, and they'll be gracious, and they say something kind to their fans. But with him, there was no line between fan and friend. It's kind of this blurry thing. No wall at all.
Hence posting his address on the Facebook and having people come over for his party. Like
to add to what Doug said, I remember there was a guy, and he did a comic book. It was Fear and Loathing in the New York Marathon. The titles escape, but this guy, I'm gonna mess up the story. This guy broke his leg and wanted to run a marathon.
Yes.
Doug, help me out if you've got the loading on.
I'm remembering it as you're telling me.
Yeah, and
I think it's in one of these comic books.
He wrote to Chris and said, "I want to run the marathon, but I can't quite. And will you run it with me?" And Chris went and he ran the marathon with this guy that like, and then he wrote a comic book about it. And
that's so cool.
Like that's Chris. Like that makes total sense in Chris's bubble. Like,
yeah.
Sure, I'll go to New York and run a marathon with you as your leg's broken or whatever it was. Somebody on the internet will correct me.
That's one of the ones I actually ordered from Lynn on Face. I haven't gotten it. She just sent it out in the mail like yesterday, but I ordered some of her comic books, some of the comic books from her. So I look forward to reading that. Chris seemed to get along quite well with his castmates from his Dark Shadows days, and you would often put them together in films, and including the job interview with him and John Carlin together. Lara Parker was in that, Catherine Lee Scott. So what was that experience like, having John Carlin and Chris Pennock together, reuniting to have some fun? What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, so much of it is unrepeatable. The amount of the amount of raunch and the amount of things that the things that they said to each other. But I remember that Chris always wanted to play a vampire, and he begged me, I just want to play a vampire. Write me a vampire thing. Write me a vampire thing. And then for the 50th anniversary, I wrote this little piece because John Carlin was going to be there, and so I got to. They said, "Oh, you can do a film with John Carlin." And I was like, "That sounds cool." And so I decided, well, Chris will be this vampire, and he needs a new caretaker, and it'll be John Carlin. And so we were in this bungalow, this cramped bungalow, smaller than my garage in Burbank for like 4 hours, and we did this thing.
Okay.
We're waiting for the air.
For the what?
For the AC to turn off.
Well, what the fuck takes so long to turn the air conditioner off? You know, I'm easy, but Jesus Christ, give me a fucking break.
Whoa! Rehearsals.
There's nothing he can't fix.
Well, that sounds very promising. Very promising indeed. Very promising. Another line there. I can't see. Oh dear. I have my... Thank you again, madam, for your time.
Why don't you get somebody else with the fucking okay? Get somebody else. Come on.
I'm glad to help an old friend out. I'll keep my fingers crossed.
Oh, God!
Sorry.
You gonna let him get away with that shit?
Just a figure of speech.
Let's action.
That sounds very promising. Thank you, madam.
You know, they were actors. They were they were pros, and so it wasn't. It was mostly just like, hey guys, okay, now we got to shoot. Like,
Yeah.
you know.
And then Lara was there and one-upping them too, right? It was
Yeah, and then Laura showed up, and you're not expecting this graceful, dignified lady to then just haul off and say the most X-rated thing to floor them both. But that's like a whole. I want to say something else about Chris and acting. I remember we had done the Mabuse film. We had done the first season of Theatre Fantastique, and he was doing a production of Third by Wendy Wasserman.
Third, yeah.
And he played this father that was suffering from dementia, and so he had two big sequences, and it's like I've known Chris now I know pretty well, and I know all his tics, and I know his little things that he does, and you catch things, especially you're with him for, what did we do, like 6 episodes in a film, so he's doing it, and it's not Chris, it's this character. Like, Chris is gone, and he's this guy that's suffering from dementia, and he was so good. It was the best performance I'd ever seen from him. I mean, I'm still like, I remember he's lost and it's a black box production too, so there's nothing around. It's just, there's nothing. But he's lost in a park, and look, he's supposed to be sitting on a park bench, and I remember him saying, I am who I am, and he's trying to remember who he is and where he is and where his house is and stuff. And I was captivated and emotional, and it was amazing. I wish that someone had filmed it, and I wish then, and afterwards I'm like, Chris, you were so good. Oh my God. He goes, well, just like, it's nothing, which is also Chris, I'm just up on stage, but like, he was so good. And I wish that someone had filmed when he did King Lear at the Actors Studio, because if he was that good in this, these 2 small sequences, him playing Lear, I can't even imagine what a performance that was.
I love that he continued to immerse himself in the theater scene and in Los Angeles, and just continued performing. I would have loved to have seen him on stage. Did you all get to see him perform on stage?
Yeah, I used to go see his play. or his plays.
Yeah.
I remember he did a stage reading with Lisa Richards once
Oh,
at
yeah.
Samuel French, and let's see, that was God, like 2014, 2015. And so he would get together with a lot of his old Dark Shadows people and do plays, and then then he'd do different plays as well, without them. But I remember he did a play with James Storm, and it was a Christmas play about Santa Claus.
Oh, I didn't know they did a show together.
Yeah. It was on La Brea in Los Angeles. It was years ago, but yeah, the two of them did a play together. I guess next time you talk to James Storm, you can ask him about that.
Yeah, they were good friends, So yeah, that's cool that they did a show together. He's someone who was taken from us too young for sure.
Yeah.
And I know you've said, Ansel, that when you filmed The Most Haunted House of Venice Beach, that you could see something was off there, but it doesn't come across at all when I watch it in the performance. I mean, he's fantastic in that, but you noticed something was amiss there, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was during COVID, and originally, people would shoot their little sequences, isolated and send it to me. And so I told Chris, well, this is how you could do it. And he's like, fuck that, I'm coming down from the mountain. All right, great, wonderful. I'm over to my house, I don't mind. And so he was going through treatments for melanoma at the time. So I knew that he just had a session in Santa Monica, and then he came to my place. So I knew, okay, well, he's tired from that. But there was something that was like the spark wasn't there like it had been in 10 years earlier. But playing the role, he was on top of it and knew how he wanted to do it. And like I said, he was, oh, this is me, I know this guy. And it was very short. He was probably at my place for like an hour and did it. Because again, you set up the camera in front of him, and he's going to give you something amazing. And it's a matter of just reining him in or saying, no, Chris, feel free, go for it, go nuts. And then he did the Shakespeare, the epilogue of The Tempest. Yeah. And he did it flawlessly.
Yeah.
Do you want to hear what I recited? Yeah. It was Shakespeare, but nobody seemed to mind. Oh, God, I wish I had a joint. Our revels now are ended. These are actors, as I foretold you, are all merely spirits and dissolve into air, into thin air.
And I'm like, all right, that's got it, Chris. Great job. He's like, yeah, it's another fucking hit. And then he left. And I remember watching him, walk back slower. There was something slower about him walking back into the car and drove off. And then, so that was, what was that? September of 2020, and then it was finished in January 2021, came out, and then like the next month he passed.
Yeah.
So he got to see it. And I remember I emailed him 2 weeks before he passed about, hey, Chris, so what if we did another season of Theatre Fantastique? Would you be down? And hey, hell yeah, what do you got? What's in mind? And I told him a couple ideas. Sounds great. Just, send me scripts. Let me know when you want. And that was it.
Yeah.
I remember when Ansel called me to tell me that Chris had passed away, and Chris was the youngest of the Dark Shadows group of actors that we work with. And when Ansel told me, it was kind of hard to believe because of everybody in our group and in that group of Dark Shadows actors. Chris was by far the most full of life. And sorry, so to think that like I could maybe believe it if it had been anybody else, but Chris being the most full of life, to think of Chris without life was antithetical to who Chris was. And so it was a surprise and just hard to kind of wrap my head around just because of like of who he was. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's I said something to Catherine of like not too long after he passed away of like it's like he gave so much that he gave it all up, that he gave it all away at he depleted himself because he would give whether it was on stage or off. Um I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know. Yeah.
It didn't feel like it was his time. That's, I think, the emotion that went through, that I was experiencing when I learned about it was it felt like they said he had so much life in him, and then he had mentioned having a skin problem, a melanoma issue, and I thought it was just one of those things you go, you have it zapped off or whatever.
Right.
It's not something that's going to be life threatening, and but he's so larger than life. My mother was like that too. It's like you don't know if they're exaggerating. How bad things are. But I mean, he didn't really let on exactly how bad things were, and it just felt like it wasn't his time. Like I don't know.
Oh, I was absolutely shocked when I heard that because I saw him in the with the Halloween Dark Shadows reunion on Zoom. That was during COVID too, and he was hanging out with James Storm and Valerie, and he was with Lynn, and they were all together ordering pizza during that. And I knew he had been sick, but I did not realize it was that serious to that extent. So
Yeah.
definitely very shocking. I guess closing thoughts. Any fun last thing you want to throw out? What you want the listeners of this podcast, who I'm sure are all fans of Chris Pennock, what you want them to know about Chris from your experience interacting with him? Anything additional that you want to add? And I'll just start with Doug, and I'll just go around.
Well, I think if there's something that really defined him for me, it was just the idea that he could be going through so much anxiety at times, but that he was still able to have a sense of humor and to be able to use that to inform his acting. He was able to use the pain that he privately suffered and channel it into his characters, or find some humor in it and make a story about it. And sometimes actors, they only find their inspiration when they're performing, when they're on the camera, and the rest of the time, they don't have anything else going on. But he was able to find every aspect of life and to give it that same energy, that creativity, in a way that when he was on camera, it informed his characters, and that's a real gift, that to be able to not just shine when you're in the limelight, but to be able to shine, when you're just, having an ordinary day with some friends. And just the way he was able to connect with people and to see the innate goodness in people and to bring it out and make them feel like they were family. And I mean, if more actors could do what he was able to do, I think there'd be a lot more talent in the craft.
Yeah. Okay. Kelsey.
What I remember the most about Chris is just his commitment to joy with reckless abandon, and it was beautiful to see.
Yeah.
And the way that he would exude that joy and that life and that vigor, and the way that he loved everything about the art and his family and the people he was with, and the way that he was also so empathetic and really cared about each person around him and got to know every person on set, whether it was the actors sharing a scene with him or whether it was Ansel's mom maybe cooking lunch for everyone. He just cared about every single person there. And I would hope to be able to take some of that with me when I'm on future performances. Just the way that he was so loving and caring with every person.
Great. Elyse?
I think he made everyone he worked with better. You know, Ansel's talked about the insights into character, and I would discuss things with him of that nature as well. But you would have to match his energy, and you would have to step up to his level to work with him and to work opposite him. And I think that generosity, that sharing of his energy and his insights and everything, I think he made us all a little better at what we do. And in that way, he's still with us. And we're carrying that flame for him.
Great. And Kelly?
If I had like life lessons from Chris Pennock to share with people, whether you're an actor or whether you're a human being or possibly both, I would say what I learned from him and what I would share with others is be authentically who you are, whatever that is, 110%. Look at everything that you experience with, as we said, you know, that childlike sense of wonder and joy at just being in the world and being able to enjoy it. And live every experience and live every day as if it could be your last, because one day it will be. And then if you've done that, you won't have any regrets, no matter how soon your time is, because you've enjoyed everything that the world has to offer to the fullest extent possible.
Great, great. Ansel, how about you?
You know, all I can really like sum up with Chris is he, even in the Dark Shadows pantheon, he was a vastly underrated actor. He really was. I mean, we all have said his larger than lifeness. That's kind of like the thing, but to still be able to deliver like actual great performances and like, you know, to captivate you and to I mean, we're still talking about him, you know, now. Like he was a great actor, and he didn't get the credit, and I think he knew he didn't get the credit that he should have gotten, or you know, he certainly got the respect, but I don't think anybody really saw truly what a great actor he was. His commitment to the work, his ethic, his delivery, and the emotional investment that he gave it and gave the entire scenario. Yeah, he was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thank you, all of you, for sharing your memories of Christopher Pennock. I feel like I know him better now, having heard all of these stories, and I am better for it. And I'm going to take some of that with me, what you have shared, into my own life, because I think his outlook on life, as Kelly pointed out, is something that we can all benefit from, I think. So thank you so much to Doug, Kelsey, Elyse, Kelly, Ansel. I sincerely appreciate you all joining me today and taking some time out of your busy schedules to talk about Chris and celebrate Chris. And I look forward to watching you all in future projects. You're all so talented, and I am so excited to see what you have coming up in the future. And Ansel, thank you, my friend. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and I hope to see you in person sooner rather than later. Hopefully it will not be years until we see each other again. Hey, cool. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I sincerely appreciate you being with me today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Hey, everyone. Please be sure to check out Ansel's films, Hollingsworth Productions. You can find them on Amazon. They're streaming as well. There we go.
With everybody.
Yes, Theatre Fantastique. The whole series is available on Blu-ray, right?
DVD.
DVD.
Maybe Blu-ray coming. Maybe Blu-ray coming.
Maybe Blu-ray coming.
Coming.
The great Nick D is streaming now. So that's exciting, right?
Imagine Chris and Great Nick D.
Oh my God. He would. Yeah. Who would he have played in the Great Nick D?
As some kind of, I feel like he would have been like a 70s porn star. That's like still like, you know. Yes, exactly. Streaking. Like that would have been, oh shit, that would have been a really good idea.
That would have been amazing. Wow. But check out these great films. You can find them all on Amazon. You can find them on different streaming platforms and hollingsworthproductions.com. There's also the YouTube channel. So be sure to check that out. And thank you, everyone, and take care.
Yes.
Just go ahead.
Hi, Christopher Pennock, proud member of the Ansel Faraj rep company.
Do you remember who you played?
Oh, who I played? No, I don't remember. Roderick Usher, among others.
That's good.
In a brief sentence. I kept thinking about trying to get there. It was a tough adventure just getting to the set. But once I got there, it was a wonderful, exhausting, brilliant experience. And I was very proud of you and me for what we did with that. And I want to do more. I love that whole experience. Love the movie. Stop me.
Okay.
Yeah, I had the sciatica. And it's been incredibly painful. It stopped me from making any trips to LA, period.
Yeah, I saw you when you put that on Facebook. It's like...
Yeah, you were wondering, oh, there is my actor. There's the old guys. Well, what do we do? Fuck.
Yeah, exactly. I'm screwed.
Yeah, but I found a wonderful physical therapist.
Excellent.
So he's going to help me.
What was your initial thoughts about the script, and what was your approach to the character?
Honestly, I found some of it a little unactable, and I had to really work at it. It didn't just roll off my tongue. It was sort of like there were two writers for Dark Shadows. One was Gordon Russell, the other was Sam Hall. Sam's stuff was wonderful, but it wasn't that easy to act. I found with yours, once I got into the groove of it, it was fine. I loved it, It was great. It was very actable. But I had to sort of just change the frequency in my brain. And now I can do your stuff.
Wait, so go into that a little bit. Like, when you say unactable, like, is it too grandiose, the dialogue, or really wordy, or like, what was...
It's just in certain things, no human beings really talk that way to each other. And it was sort of like you had an idea of how you wanted it to be, but it's like, that's why it's really good to work it out with actors, almost while you're writing it and improvise and things like that. I've always thought that is an incredible way to do it. Then you can marry both techniques.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good.
But you're phenomenal now. It was just yeah.
So what was your approach to the character? Like, did you study or go into... I gave you a couple things.
Yeah. I got obsessed with Aleister Crowley. And all of the things I wanted to use that were Aleister Crowley-ish, we weren't able to do. Because they were too sexual. And it just wouldn't have worked out. I mean, I wanted to have orgies, in the basement of the thing, in the library. Aleister Crowley, I was your boy with that. Anyway, and then I think I studied some actors that you said, look at these, Chris, look at these actors. And I said, okay, so I looked at those actors, I forgot who they were now, and studied them, incorporated some of that. And somehow I ended up with this outrageous, wonderful character. I don't know how I did it. I remember I got really stoned the night before our first day of shooting, so that day, and which I never do, I hadn't smoked in 30 years, that day my brain was just cooked. Just absolutely cooked. Anyway, why did I say that?
Did you have a funny story that happened when you were making it, or like a memory? It's like something that you like.
Yes, I think the funniest thing was my frantic phone calls to you guys because I was lost. I took the wrong exit on the freeway. So I was calling, I think I said either come and get me or get an ambulance. And I think you might have been a little freaked out. So you sent some friends to come get me because you had to keep shooting because you were the genius of the day. And I was found, thank God, I was found by a kind soul and delivered to the set. Had a little coffee, and off we went. That was crazy. Then there were other times when it was exhausting, and we had to redo something, and I let you have it. And that was funny, in retrospect. While it's happening, it's horrendous. You don't want this, your worst enemy. Well, doing these, including the Theatre Fantastique ones, it was like Dark Shadows was reborn, and the whole genre was reborn, and we were doing it. And I could give myself permission to just act my ass off. Just act my ass off. And you would calm me down, a little more subtle. But it was a wonderful experience because I could just overact my ass off with an organic method. One can, as I said when I got the Idlewild Lifetime Achievement Award, I want to thank the Actors Studio for teaching me how to overact organically. All you actors out there, you can overact, but as long as organic, it's okay. Because we overact in life. Look at me now. This is real. This is me. Sweating.
So, okay, Theatre Fantastique stuff, real quick.
Okay. Yay! Theatre Fantastique!
What was it like playing Roderick Usher and versus all those other characters that you got to play? I mean, you had a quite diverse.
Yeah. Yeah. This stuff was incredible. Every part was amazing. And I am so happy I got to do it. Thank you so much. You gave me a jolt of inspiration, that's for sure. Roderick Usher, well, I have to confess, I watched Marty Landau's Roderick Usher. He did a movie of Roderick Usher. And he was just acting his ass off. And I thought, oh, okay, I can do that. I'll do that. I'll do Marty. And then when I got the script from you, I just did me as Roderick Usher. I found my own Roderick Usher. And you helped me a lot with you didn't direct much, but just enough to send me right into a spooky, subtle, ghostly, perfect, wonderful. I loved it. I loved the way it looked too when it was up on the big screen. After that, we did Descent of the Maelstrom.
Yeah.
The Captain. That was fun. I did an Irish accent. That was great. And lots of smoke, lots of fog. I could just feel that felt very, very real for me. Actually, they all felt very real. They really felt I was inhabiting this life. And you set the whole thing up. That was cool. And the Murderous Mahones was the funniest day of filming I ever had the experience of, ever. That was great. And I hope we can do more of those.
Yeah.
But it was so funny. I loved it. That was just joy. And then the
Madame Le Sirk.
Madame Le Sirk. Mr. Stamp.
That was it was a tricky one.
Yeah, tricky one, but fun, and that's doing great.
Yeah.
People love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
And then we did Family Wolf, which was like
Family Wolf, yeah, another fun one. Ridiculous, outrageous, funny, terrific, and everybody got a shot of acting totally ridiculously surreal.
Was there anything?
And that was like a Tim Burton film. That was great.
I wish we had better sets though, but
not bad for what we had.
No. Was there anything challenging with any of those characters, or filming any of those episodes, or?
Not challenging. Just I loved every one of them.
The character that
I was really happy with all the work I did. I mean, I don't know how I could have done them better. So I was really happy with that work, which is the main thing for an actor, because you did good. I don't know.